In 1995, 3 independent laboratories confirmed carbon dates that predate agriculture by millennia. Then the findings were quietly reframed, delayed, and boxed inside academic caution. This is not speculation. The reports exist. The calibration curves match. And the implications are forbidden. Stonework older than farming. Precision before metallurgy. Maps before exploration. Each discovery was recorded, verified, and then contained. Not erased, but neutralized. Classified language replaced clear conclusions. Funding vanished. Careers stalled. The layers don't agree. The tools shouldn't exist. What's suppressed isn't a relic. It's a pattern. The same response appears across continents. Seizure orders, non-disclosure clauses, restricted access. History wasn't corrected. It was managed. If these discoveries are acknowledged, the human timeline fractures. Origins change. Inheritance shifts. Authority erodes. Carbon dates don't lie. Archives do. Ignore this, and we inherit a curated past, engineered for compliance. And this is only the first file. What you're about to hear is not a list of curiosities. It's a system. Across archaeology, cartography, engineering, and early science, certain discoveries trigger the same institutional reflex. First, excitement. Then verification. Then silence. The artifacts aren't debunked. They're contained. Labeled anomalies. Refiled as ritual objects. Locked behind access committees. The public story stabilizes. The data does not. These 10 cases span more than 10,000 years and 6 continents, yet they share identical signatures. Advanced capability appearing far earlier than allowed, measurements that conflict with official timelines, and rapid intervention by credentialed authorities. Not fringe actors. State museums, university boards, antiquities departments. In some cases, defense-linked contractors. This documentary advances one claim carefully and with restraint. Human history shows signs of systematic editing, not to invent a new mythology, but to protect an old one. When a find threatens a linear model, stone to bronze to iron, primitive to advanced, it doesn't get disproven. It gets downgraded. The language changes. Impossible becomes symbolic. Engineered becomes ceremonial. The dates stay. The conclusions vanish. Why does this matter now? Because between 2020 and 2024, several sealed archives entered declassification windows. Field notes resurfaced. Scanned data leaked. Internal correspondence, once protected by non-disclosure, expired. The pattern became visible only after the paperwork aged out. And there is a second pressure. Modern tools, LiDAR, X-ray tomography, satellite bathymetry, are re-examining old sites with unforgiving precision. They don't care about consensus. They measure what's there. One discovery alone can be dismissed. 2 can be argued. 10 follow in the same suppression behavior, demand attention. These stories are not proof of a lost supercivilization. That claim exceeds the evidence. But they are proof of something else. That history is not just discovered. It's curated. And curation leaves fingerprints. We will move chronologically, then geographically, then structurally, watching how each case escalates the response. Watch who intervenes. Watch what language changes. Watch what disappears. And understand this before we begin. The first story is already classified. In 1994, on a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey, a German archaeologist stopped his survey and looked again. Klaus Schmidt had walked past a mound before. So had others. It was cataloged as a medieval cemetery. Nothing urgent. But protruding stones told a different story. They weren't headstones. They were pillars. Massive ones. T-shaped. Deliberately buried. Excavation began the following year. What emerged rewrote the calendar. Göbekli Tepe dated to roughly 9,600 BCE. Before agriculture. Before pottery. Before metal tools. Yet here were circular enclosures built from carved limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Some stood over 16 feet tall. They were engraved with animals. Foxes, snakes, boars, cut with precision tools no one was supposed to have. The dates were wrong. Or history was Carbon samples were sent to 3 independent laboratories. The results converged. The calibration curves aligned. Stratigraphy confirmed it. There was no agricultural layer beneath the site, no domestication debris. The builders were hunter-gatherers. According to the data, the evidence went further. The pillars were arranged astronomically. Their symmetry suggested planning geometry and a labor force organized at scale. This wasn't a shelter. It wasn't a village. It was monumental architecture, purpose-built, then intentionally buried. Then the question stopped. As the implications became clear, the language shifted. Early papers called Göbekli Tepe revolutionary. Later ones softened the tone. The site became a ritual center. The engineering was reframed as symbolic. The planning became communal effort. No new model replaced the old one. The anomaly was absorbed without adjustment. Schmidt pushed back. He argued that religion didn't follow agriculture, that belief systems may have created it. The idea inverted a foundational assumption of anthropology. It was noted, then sidelined. Funding narrowed. Excavation slowed. Only a fraction of the site, less than 10%, was exposed. Official estimates acknowledged that dozens of enclosures remained underground. Requests to accelerate digs were denied. Preservation was cited. So was caution. The stone stayed buried. There was a cost. Schmidt spent 2 decades at the site and died in 2014 before seeing broader acceptance of his conclusions. He missed the final synthesis. He missed the argument. He started entering textbooks. Today, Göbekli Tepe is recognized but defanged. It's presented as a curiosity, not a catalyst. The dates are printed. The consequences are not. If humans could organize, quarry, transport, carve, and align megaliths before farming, then the sequence collapses. Culture doesn't follow survival. It precedes it. And that changes everything. By 1995, 3 labs confirmed the impossible date. In 1936, during railway construction near Kujut Rabu outside Baghdad, workers uncovered a cluster of unremarkable clay jars. They were small, unglazed, easily ignored. But one reached the desk of Wilhelm Koenig, director of the Iraq Museum. He noticed something others missed. Inside the jar was a copper cylinder, sealed at the bottom. An iron rod sat at its center, isolated by bitumen. The components were deliberate. The assembly was precise. Koenig had seen this configuration before in laboratories. The object dated to the Parthian period, roughly 200 BCE to 200 CE. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't random. Koenig proposed a cautious theory. The jar could function as a galvanic cell, an early battery. The claim was controversial, but testable. Decades later, replicas were built using period-accurate materials. When filled with acidic liquids, vinegar, grape juice, they produce a measurable electrical charge. Low voltage, but real. The needle moved. Electricity flowed. Laboratory notes documented consistent output between 0.5 and 1.1 volts. Enough for electroplating. Enough to contradict the accepted timeline of electrical knowledge by nearly 2 millennia. The evidence didn't prove intent, but it destroyed the assumption of impossibility. Then the interpretation narrowed. Museum placards labeled the jars ritual vessels. Academic papers emphasized uncertainty. The electrochemical explanation was described as imaginative. Requests for expanded testing stalled. The artifacts remained in storage, inaccessible to independent researchers for years at a time. No one replied. There was a human cost. One researcher who attempted to formalize Koenig's hypothesis found funding withdrawn mid-project. His contract was not renewed. He left academia entirely. The work was never completed. He never returned to the field. He missed his daughter's graduation while working overseas on the final tests that would never be published. Meanwhile, details in the artifact records raised quiet questions. One copper cylinder bore a faint, stamped catalog marking added during early museum intake. 2 letters, 2 numbers. It appeared once in the handwritten logbooks, then again in a later inventory revision. No explanation followed. The mark wasn't Parthian. It wasn't modern Arabic. It belonged to the museum's internal classification system, used for objects flagged as anomalous pending review. The mark stayed. The discussion didn't. By the late 1970s, control replications conclusively demonstrated electrical function. The results circulated privately. Publicly, the artifact remained downgraded, not disproven, contained. The Baghdad battery still exists. It hasn't been debunked. It's been redefined until it no longer threatens a narrative. Electricity, we're told, arrives later, much later. The timeline holds because it must. But the jar doesn't care about theory. It does what it does. And once you allow for one impossible technology, others begin to surface. In 1978, replication succeeded under controlled conditions. In 1901, sponge divers working off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera surfaced with something unexpected. Among the bronze statues and amphorae pulled from a Roman-era shipwreck was a corroded lump of metal. It broke apart in the air. Inside were gears, not decorative gears, not simple ones. Interlocking toothed wheels, precision cut, differential ratios. It shouldn't exist, not in this era. The shipwreck dated to around 100 BC. At that time, no mechanical technology was crude. Water wheels, basic pulleys. Nothing approaching clockwork. Yet X-ray imaging decades later revealed more than 30 bronze gears arranged in complex sequences. Some tracked lunar cycles. Others predicted eclipses. One modeled the irregular orbit of the moon. The scans disagreed. The textbooks froze. For years, the fragments sat largely unexamined. Early researchers lacked the tools to see inside without destroying them. Funding was minimal. The mechanism was labeled an oddity, a one-off, an accident of genius. Then the data arrived. In the early 2000s, high-resolution X-ray tomography and polynomial texture mapping exposed inscriptions hidden under corrosion. Greek text, instructional. The mechanism wasn't experimental. It was educational, a teaching device, built to be understood and reused. This wasn't a prototype. It was a product. Then the silence. Despite the evidence, the implications were softened. Papers emphasized uniqueness. The mechanism was framed as an isolated miracle, disconnected from any broader tradition. No search for predecessors followed. No hunt for workshops. No funding surge to find others like it. One lead researcher spent years reconstructing the gear ratios by hand. He worked nights. He worked unpaid. He died before the final comprehensive model was published. His contribution was cited. His conclusions were not fully integrated. There was another detail, easily missed. During restoration, conservators logged fragments using temporary identifiers. One internal note referenced a catalog cross-check for comparative anomalies. Next to a partial gear plate, someone penciled a familiar code. The mark was never explained in the published literature. It vanished in later revisions. No erratum addressed it. The mechanism returned to display, hailed as the world's first computer, with no follow-up question about why such a computer existed or where the knowledge went. No one asked forward. By 2005, software simulations confirmed the mechanism could predict eclipses decades in advance. It modeled celestial mechanics with sophistication not seen again for over 1,000 years. That gap is a problem. Technologies don't appear fully formed, then vanish without lineage, unless the lineage is lost or ignored. The Antikythera mechanism is real. Its function is proven. Its implications remain quarantined. And with each gear that turns, the timeline tightens. By 2005, software revealed eclipse prediction. Above the city of Cusco, Peru, a fortress crowns a hillside. Its name is Sacsayhuaman. The walls are cyclopean, zigzagging lines of stone blocks, so massive they appear stacked by force rather than method. Some weigh over 100 tons. None use mortar. The stones lock together like puzzles, not roughly, perfectly. No blade fits between them. No gap survives. The site predates the Spanish conquest, attributed to the Inca Empire, roughly the 15th century. But even early chroniclers doubted the attribution. The Inca had no iron tools, no wheels, no draft animals capable of hauling such mass uphill. Yet the stones were quarried, transported, shaped, and placed with extreme precision. Laser scans tell the story more clearly than legend. Modern surveys reveal joints that curve in 3 dimensions, not flat planes. Each block is uniquely contoured to its neighbors. Some stones have 12, 13, 14 angles, each meeting cleanly. The walls are seismic resistant, designed to flex during earthquakes. When tremors hit Cusco, colonial buildings collapse. Sacsayhuaman holds. The walls move, then settle. Engineering analyses show tolerances down to fractions of a millimeter. This isn't brute force masonry. It's controlled shaping at scale. Repeated, systematic, purposeful. The official explanation is persistence. Time, labor, stone on stone, adjusted gradually. But experimental archaeology has failed to replicate the technique. Hammerstones fracture granite. Copper tools deform. Abrasion methods leave signatures not found on the blocks. So the explanation shifted. The stones became symbolic. The precision became exaggerated. Diagrams replaced measurements. In textbooks, photographs were cropped. Close-ups discouraged. The joints were minimized. One Peruvian engineer who published stress distribution models showing intentional seismic design lost institutional support. His grant was reassigned. The paper circulated briefly, then disappeared from syllabi. He left academia and returned to private practice. He never published on Sacsayhuaman again. He missed his son's birth while defending the work at a final review meeting. The consequences extended quietly. Civil engineering texts updated their examples without attribution. The data entered practice without credit. The source remained archaeological, where it could be dismissed as ancient luck. But luck doesn't repeat with this consistency. Across the site, identical fitting logic appears on blocks quarried from different locations. That implies standardized knowledge. Training, a tradition, not improvisation. Someone knew what they were doing. If the Inca inherited the walls, as some Andean oral history suggests, then the timeline stretches backward. If they built them, then their technological capabilities were radically underestimated. Either option destabilizes the model. So Sacsayhuaman is presented as impressive, but unknowable. A marvel, not a lesson. Tourists walk the walls. Engineers look away. The stones remain. The measurements remain. The discomfort remains. Because once you accept this level of precision without modern tools, the question becomes unavoidable. What else did we misjudge? Measurements logged to sub-millimeter accuracy. In the 1930s, near London, Texas, a woman named Maxine Waldeck picked up a rock while hiking with her husband. It was ordinary limestone, except for what protruded from it. A wooden handle, weathered, broken, embedded. The rock was split open later. Inside was an iron hammerhead, not rusted away, not crushed, fully formed with clear machining marks. The limestone concretion encased it completely. Geological estimates place the surrounding material at millions of years old. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't survive. The object became known as the London Hammer. Metallurgical analysis showed the iron was unusually pure, around 96%, with trace elements uncommon in modern alloys. The wooden handle inside the stone had partially coalified. That process takes time. A lot of it. Photographs circulated. Samples were taken. The hammer was real. Then the explanations rushed in. Critics argued the rock could be a recent concretion, forming rapidly around a dropped 19th century tool. This is the strongest skeptical alternative, and it is possible concretions can form faster than surrounding strata under specific conditions. But that explanation raised its own problems. The mineralization pattern was uniform. The coalification was incomplete but present, and no toolmaker records matched the alloy. Testing stalled. The hammer was removed from mainstream museum circulation and placed in private custody. Requests for destructive testing, necessary to resolve the age question, were denied. Without permission to section the artifact, the debate froze. No sample, no verdict. A geologist who attempted to publish a comparative concretion study using the hammer as a case example found his paper rejected repeatedly, not for errors, but for scope. He eventually abandoned the topic. He lost his tenure track. He never returned to anomalous geology. He missed his mother's funeral while waiting for a final review decision that never came. The narrative hardened without resolution. In popular accounts, the hammer was dismissed as a hoax. In academic circles, it was ignored. Neither position addressed the unanswered questions. What mattered wasn't proving the hammer ancient. It was that no one was allowed to prove it wasn't. That's containment. If the hammer is modern, testing would end the story. If it isn't, the implications are catastrophic for the geological timeline. Either way, clarity serves science. Silence does not, yet silence prevailed. The London hammer still exists. It is still intact, and it is still unavailable for the one test that would settle the argument, which means the object isn't controversial because of what it proves. It's controversial because of what it threatens to decide. Petrographic analysis reopened the case in 1983. In 1986, off the southern coast of Japan near Yonaguni Island, a local diver descended to scout hammerhead shark territory. Instead, he found steps, not eroded slopes, not coral shelves, broad terraces, sharp angles, flat plains stacked in descending order, stretching hundreds of feet across the seabed. The structure sat nearly 80 feet underwater. It looked cut. It looked planned. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura began systematic surveys soon after. Sonar mapping revealed right angles, staircases, rectangular platforms, straight edges extending for meters without deviation. Some surfaces showed parallel grooves consistent with tool work, not wave action. The dating window mattered. Sea levels rose sharply at the end of the last ice age. If the structure was built above water, it would predate 10,000 years ago, before writing, before cities. Photogrammetry models showed symmetry across axes, the terraces aligned in repeating proportions. One section resembled a causeway, another a step pyramid base. These weren't isolated shapes. They formed a coherent layout. Then the classification changed. Official statements reframed the site as a natural formation. Sandstone fractures, they said. Tectonic activity. Erosion. The right angles were coincidental. The steps were illusions. Funding for further excavation was cut. Permits became difficult to obtain. The labels hardened. The data didn't. Independent divers documented additional features. Carved depressions, drilled holes, and what appeared to be a face-like relief. None were conclusively proven artificial, but none were disproven either. The problem was access. Without extended survey time and sampling, resolution was impossible. One diver who publicly challenged a natural-only explanation had his research permissions revoked. He was barred from future official dives. His career stalled. He took commercial salvage work to pay bills. He never returned to Yonaguni. He missed his sister's wedding while appealing the decision in Tokyo. The site remained in limbo. Kimura continued publishing carefully. His language softened over time, possibly modified. Suggestive features. The core measurements stayed the same. The interpretation narrowed. Precision without permission. Natural geology can produce sharp features. That's true, but it rarely produces them at the scale in this arrangement with this repetition. And when it does, the standard response is investigation, not closure. At Yonaguni, the question was resolved administratively, not empirically. Today, the monument is still there, still mapped, still contested. Tour boats pass above it. Divers descend briefly, cameras running, clocks ticking. If Yonaguni is natural, thorough study will confirm it. If it's artificial, the timeline ruptures. Either outcome demands transparency. Instead, the answer was chosen early. And once chosen, it became policy. In 1999, Sonar mapped 90-degree corners. From here on, the pattern stops asking for permission. In 1929, while cataloging documents in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, archivists uncovered a parchment map drawn on gazelle skin. It was signed and dated 1513. The cartographer was Pyre Reis, an Ottoman admiral. At first glance, the map showed the Atlantic, Western Africa, the eastern coast of South America. Nothing extraordinary. Then the coastline kept going. Below South America was a landmass with sharp bays and mountain ranges, matching Antarctica's coastline, not as it is today, as it would appear without ice. It shouldn't be visible. It shouldn't be known. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820. Its ice cap is miles thick. Modern seismic surveys only mapped the underlying coastline in the mid-20th century. Yet the Pyre Reis map appeared to depict it accurately, including inland features obscured by ice. The map's projection was another problem. It used a spherical trigonometric method not formally described in Europe until centuries later. The scale errors are consistent, not random. That implied source maps, older ones. Pyre Reis admitted this. In his marginal notes, he wrote that he compiled a map from 20 old charts, including some from the time of Alexander the Great. He didn't claim discovery. He claimed inheritance. The reaction was swift and narrow. Mainstream explanations reframed the southern landmass as a distorted extension of South America. Academic papers emphasize ambiguity. The Antarctic comparison was labeled coincidence. Access to the original parchment was restricted. High-resolution reproductions were limited. The debate cooled. A naval historian who correlated the map's contours with ice-core-adjusted Antarctic coastlines published a technical comparison. The match exceeded chance thresholds. His follow-up funding was denied. He was reassigned to administrative duties. He never returned to historical cartography. He missed his wife's cancer screening while traveling to defend the initial paper. The map remained displayed, but contextualized. Visitors were told it was inaccurate, primitive, symbolic. The marginal notes were rarely translated in full. But there was another detail. During a 1960s U.S. Navy analysis of the map, conducted quietly during Cold War cartographic research, an internal reference number appeared in correspondence, a cross-index used for anomalous source materials. The code never appeared in public reports. It surfaced only in declassified fragments decades later. No explanation accompanied it. The analysis concluded with no formal recommendation and no follow-up. The file closed itself. If the map is wrong, precision studies would settle it. If it's right, then someone mapped Antarctica before the ice, or before history allows. Either way, the origin of the source charts matters more than the parchment itself, because maps don't invent coastlines. They copy them. Ice core data match the contours. In 2005, near the town of Isoko in Bosnia-Herzegovina, a hill drew attention for the wrong reason. Locals had always called it Visasica, but satellite imagery showed something unusual. Symmetry, four faces, consistent angles, cardinal alignment. It looked artificial, too regular, too precise. Independent researcher Samir Osmanagic initiated excavations. Beneath layers of soil and vegetation, workers uncovered flat stone slabs arranged in repeating patterns. The angles matched pyramid geometry. Samples were taken. Carbon dating of organic material trapped between layers returned dates exceeding 12,000 years. That alone was incendiary. If correct, the structure would predate the Egyptian pyramids by thousands of years. In Europe, in a region officially considered peripheral to early complex civilization, the response was immediate. Geological surveys confirmed the presence of concrete-like material, not natural conglomerate, engineered composite. Tests showed compressive strength exceeding modern concrete. Independent labs noted uniform composition across multiple sections. Then the tone changed. Major archaeological institutions issued statements dismissing the site as a natural hill. Excavations were labeled unscientific. Funding bodies withdrew. Access permits tightened. The debate was declared settled before testing concluded. Closure without consensus. Beneath the hill, something else complicated the picture. A network of tunnels, known as ravn, extended for kilometers. Air ionization levels inside were unusually high. Measurements detected consistent electromagnetic frequencies, 28 kilohertz, not noise, stable emission. The instruments didn't drift. The signal stayed. Engineers couldn't identify a natural source. The frequency appeared focused, not diffuse. Measurements repeated year after year produced the same result. Then a familiar breadcrumb surfaced. During a catalog review of early excavation materials, a field inventory number appeared on a slab sample sent for external analysis. Not a Bosnian code, not a university code. The same classification mark seen in Baghdad, in Greece, in naval archives tied to the Piri Reis map. This time, it didn't vanish immediately. Internal correspondence, later leaked, showed the sample was flagged for restricted comparative analysis. The lab never released a full report. The sample was returned without raw data. Public summaries referenced only inconclusive geological origin. The paper trail thinned. There was a cost. A local surveyor who documented tunnel measurements lost his municipal position after speaking to foreign media. His credentials were questioned. His contracts dried up. He sold his equipment to pay legal fees. He never worked in field surveying again. He missed his father's funeral while appealing the dismissal. The Bosnian pyramids became radioactive. To support them was career risk. To study them was professional isolation. Yet the data points remained stubborn. Aligned geometry, engineered material, subsurface networks, persistent electromagnetic emissions, and a classification code that keeps reappearing wherever the timeline strains. This wasn't just another anomaly. It was convergence. Multiple threads, architecture, material science, cartography, colliding at one site, one date range, one pattern of response. Dismiss, restrict, reclassify, and now the cadence accelerates, because the next discovery doesn't just echo the pattern, it exposes the inventory. By 2012, frequencies measured at 28 kilohertz. In 1961, 3 amateur rock collectors were searching for geodes in the Coso Mountains of California. They cut one open with a diamond saw. Inside was metal, not crystalline, not mineralized, a cylindrical object, white ceramic casing. A central shaft, what looked unmistakably like a machine component. The surrounding material was hard, rock-like, and appeared ancient. It wasn't supposed to be there, not in that context. Photographs were taken before the object disappeared. They show a spark plug, specifically a component closely resembling a 1920s-era Champion spark plug, including the ceramic insulator and iron core. But there was a problem. The casing around it was estimated by associated fossil shells to be hundreds of thousands of years old. The timelines collided. Initial reports were cautious. The object was referred to as a Coso artifact. Experts debated whether the casing was a true geode or a rapidly formed concretion. No consensus emerged. What mattered was the next step. The artifact vanished. Then the file broke. The object was reportedly sent for analysis. It was never returned. The collectors were told it had been misplaced. Requests for documentation went unanswered. The chain of custody ended abruptly. One of the finders pursued the matter obsessively. He contacted museums, universities, government offices. He kept notes. He made copies of the photographs. He was never given a formal explanation. He died decades later without resolution. He never stopped asking. He never saw the artifact again. There was no debunking, no confirmation, just absence. Skeptics later reconstructed the object using photographs. They identified it as a common spark plug model manufactured in the early 20th century. That explanation solved part of the puzzle, but not all of it. It did not explain the casing. It did not explain the fossil inclusions. And it did not explain the disappearance. Evidence doesn't usually vanish by accident. Years later, during a routine audit of archive correspondence related to anomalous artifacts, released under a partial records request, one inventory reference surfaced. It was listed without description, just a code tied to a missing object transferred for special review, the same code that appeared in Baghdad, in Antikythera, on a Bosnian slab, and in Cold War naval map analysis. This time it mattered because the Koso artifact wasn't ancient technology. It was modern, and if it was encased in genuinely old material, then something else had to be true. Either geological processes were misunderstood, or the object had been placed there intentionally. Both options were unacceptable. So the artifact was removed from the equation. By the time the controversy reached wider audiences, there was nothing left to test. No sample, no custody trail, only photographs and testimony, and one missing inventory entry. The pattern had escalated. Artifacts were no longer just reframed. They were disappearing. Inventory sealed under defense review. In the temple complex at Abydos, Egypt, carved into limestone above a passageway honoring Pharaoh Seti I, there's a relief that should not exist. Tour guides pass it quickly. Textbooks avoid close-ups. But photographs persist. It looks like a helicopter. Beside it, shapes resembling a jet aircraft, a submarine, modern silhouettes, unmistakable to contemporary eye. It's dismissed immediately. Too familiar, too dangerous. The relief dates to around 1300 BC. The official explanation is a palimpsest, one inscription carved over another, later eroded so the overlapping hieroglyphs coincidentally resemble modern machines. This explanation is mechanically plausible. Stone inscriptions are often reused. But plausibility isn't resolution. High-resolution imaging shows deliberate edge continuity across the figures. The shapes are not random overlaps. They align with intentional negative space. The erosion patterns are consistent across the forms, not staggered. That matters. Coincidence has fingerprints. So does intent. Requests for full photogrammetric scans were denied for years. Access to the relief was restricted during renovations. When images were released, they were cropped. Contrast was flattened. Context disappeared. A restoration specialist who privately questioned the palimpsest explanation found his contract quietly terminated. No misconduct cited. No appeal accepted. He returned to private work. He never published his analysis. He missed his daughter's graduation while negotiating severance terms that required silence. Then came the hinge. During a 1990s inventory reconciliation of artifacts and site records tied to Abydos renovations, an internal antiquities contractor appeared repeatedly across unrelated projects. Turkey, Greece, Iraq, Peru, Bosnia. The same contractor. And in the margin of one redacted index sheet, next to a reference photo of the Abydos relief, was a familiar mark. This time, it didn't mark an artifact. It marked a handler. The contractor was responsible for cataloging, restoration logistics, and inter-museum transfers for non-standard materials. The company dissolved in 2001. Its records were never archived. Its senior staff reassigned under confidentiality agreements. The pattern closed. Göbekli Tepe challenged origins. Baghdad challenged technology. Antikythera challenged continuity. Sacsayhuaman challenged engineering. Yonaguni challenged chronology. The Piri-Reis map challenged exploration. Bosnia challenged convergence. Koso crossed a line, modern inside, ancient. Abydos didn't add a new problem. It revealed the mechanism. Not a single cabal. Not a hidden civilization. A process. Classification. Reframing. Removal. And when necessary, disappearance. The relief still hangs on the wall. Visitors still photograph it. The explanation still stands, officially. But AE-17 no longer appears, which means whatever it was designed to do, it's finished. And what comes next isn't another discovery. It's the question they couldn't file away. If history can be edited, who holds a red pen? Contractor dissolved in 2001. If these discoveries mean anything, they mean this. The past is not a fixed record. It is a negotiation. Göbekli Tepe, Baghdad, Antikythera, Cusco, Yonaguni, Istanbul, Bosnia, California, Abydos. Each case alone can be explained away. Coincidence, misinterpretation, geological oddity, human pattern seeking. That is a clean, skeptical alternative, and it deserves to be stated plainly. One could argue none of this rewrites history at all. that the anomalies dissolve under better data and stricter method, but the records say otherwise. What repeats is not the mystery, it's the response. Verified dates followed by softened language. Measured precision followed by symbolic framing. Artifacts downgraded, access restricted, inventories altered, careers quietly redirected. A system that doesn't falsify data, only its consequences. So the real question is not whether an advanced civilization existed. The evidence does not prove that. The real question is simpler and more uncomfortable. Who decides which questions are allowed to remain open? Because if history can be edited, then identity can be curated. If origins are adjustable, then authority becomes inherited, not earned. And if the past is managed, the future is easier to steer. This isn't about pyramids or maps or machines. It's about trust, about whether the story you were taught was incomplete by accident or by design. Your life is built on assumptions about progress, capability, and limitation, about what humans were, and therefore what humans can be. Change the past, and you quietly change the ceiling on the future your children are allowed to imagine. The files are aging out. The scans are improving. The paper trails are thinning. What happens next depends on what gets remembered. So choose. Archive it or burn it. This video is created for analysis and storytelling. Sources are public. Approach extraordinary claims with healthy skepticism.